So I'm incredibly pleased and proud to find out that the mayor of San Francisco has made a proclamation that this is Hamish Sandison Day in San Francisco. I wasn't expecting that, and I'm deeply honored and grateful. So you want to know about my first meeting with Jerry Carlin. I came over here to the Bay Area as a Berkeley Law School student. And I was very interested in the question of how can we provide access to legal services for artists? Because without legal advice, the rights that artists enjoy cannot be enforced. And as it happened, a group of artists and lawyers had met just before I arrived to discuss the very idea of creating a legal services organization for artists. And I met them through an artist called Leith Johnson, who was then president of Artists Equity. And she put me in touch with other people. We joined this planning committee. And soon after that, it became clear that the person we needed to talk to was Jerry Carlin, because he had been the first director of San Francisco Neighborhood Legal Assistance Foundation, providing legal advice to people who couldn't afford a lawyer. And he had that same commitment that I had to the use of law as a tool of social change, giving support to people to enforce their rights. But he'd also then become a full-time painter. So, he had this background in legal services, background as a painter, and I was introduced to him by the head of a foundation, which ultimately provided some finance for Bay Area Lawyers for the Arts, as it then became. That was Tom Layton of the Gavodi Foundation. So I think I first met Jerry in the back of a car driven by Tom, and Tom was trying to tell Jerry that he really should get involved. He should be the first president of the board. And obviously I endorsed that view because he had the perfect credentials for that role. And so that must have been late 1974. And after that first car ride, I saw a lot more of him, and we got him involved in the group. And ultimately, everybody agreed he was the right man to be the first chair of the board. How has organising Baylor as a non-profit influenced my subsequent career? Well, I think I've been involved in a lot of charity work and in the arts as well as in other areas. And so I think that it taught me about how you bring a group of people together who have a common objective, and they do it for the good of the community, not for profit. And so that was my formative experience, I suppose, in non-profit organizing, both as a lawyer and more recently in politics, where you've got to bring people on board to an idea. So the idea has got to be clearly articulated. People have to buy into it, and they have to do it for unselfish reasons. And I would say that experience was absolutely formative of my approach to the charity sector and also to politics. I've never wanted to be a litigator, really, because I like to work with people who are still talking to each other, working in a positive way for the future, whereas litigation does tend to look backwards at things that have gone wrong in the past. I trained as a barrister in the UK, so I was familiar with litigation skills and techniques, but I really wanted to look forward rather than back. So the experience with Baylor was probably absolutely formative in everything that I've done subsequently. As I mentioned in my previous comment, it's about using the law as a tool of social change. And I think you're better at that in the United States than we are in the UK, because of course there's a US Constitution, and you go to court to enforce equal protection of the law and so on. Whereas in the UK, it's more a matter of going to Parliament rather than to the courts to seek redress or to seek improvement in people's condition. So Baylor then was really the inspiration and the guiding light for most of the work that I've subsequently done in charities and in politics. I went back to the UK, partly because I wanted to be involved in politics. So you've asked me about my current involvement in the Labour Party. I'm what some people would call tribal Labour, so I grew up with it. My father was a parliamentary candidate, and for me, improving people's economic, social, and political status was what politics was for, and I only saw the Labour Party as the means to achieve that. I can't think of any other party that's so committed to improving the livelihoods of people who are, the bottom of society, who are disadvantaged in any way, whether it's gender, race, whether it's economic circumstances, loss of jobs, all of the problems that we have in society. I saw the Labour Party as the way to address those problems. And so your question really is so easy for me to answer, because I never thought of being involved in any political party except the Labour Party. That was as simple as that. You've asked about my father. He was not an actor. He trained as a barrister, but he became the first General Secretary of Actors Equity, the performers union. So I grew up with people in the theatre world, and actually he died young at the age of 45. I was 6 years old, and the members of Actors Equity, because he died leaving no pension, my mother had me and 3 other children, and we were, not well off. Members of Actors Equity, who are actors who don't make mega bucks, most of them, they put aside some money by donations for a memorial fund, which helped my mother and my siblings get through life. So I owed a lot to the theatre profession, and of course to the wider arts community. And I guess it's true to say that my involvement in Baylor, which of course wasn't just about visual artists, it's always been about all of the arts, was my way of perhaps repaying a debt that I felt I owed to the arts community for the support they'd given to my mother and me and my sisters when my father had died very young. Well, I chair a group called Mediaspace Global, and it's a network of people in the media and in advertising and the arts more generally. And our aim is to connect people, to break down barriers, both across sectors and across countries, globally, in fact. And what we try to do is to provide opportunities, particularly for younger people who want to get into the media, to find opportunities to improve their professional standing, to get training. We want to encourage people from the most diverse possible backgrounds who want to get into the media to help them achieve their goals professionally, personally, and in terms of their businesses. And so I've always liked connecting people, whether it's between different arts communities, arts disciplines, lawyers and artists who, have not had very close relationships before. And here it's connecting people across the planet who have an interest in the media. And ironically, it was COVID that sort of forced us online, but that has given us benefits as well, because we will have professional networking events for media professionals across the globe who probably wouldn't ever come together physically in one space. So from California to Singapore, and I'm lucky because I'm in the middle in the UK in the time zone, I can have a meeting across those time zones at about 2 p.m., which is more civilized. And some of them in Singapore are up very late, and some of them in California are up very early. But it's allowing that cross-border kind of networking to support the media community, but particularly, as I say, younger people and people from different backgrounds across the world. Well, I started, you ask about tech startups, with the traditional mainstream media, arts, music, publishing, obviously being a copyright lawyer and looking at all of those. And then when I moved to Washington and joined a law firm there, got involved in the tech sector, particularly around intellectual property, and those are the crown jewels of all tech companies. And I wrote a book with a couple of colleagues about software protection under US law. And so what I've done more recently in my professional career is to help startups in the tech sector who probably don't know much about how to protect their technology in terms of intellectual property rights protection, whether it's copyright or more complex IPR issues around patent protection or trademark protection. So I've found it really quite satisfying to work with the younger tech startups who really need to understand how to protect their technology if they're going to make a success of their brilliant ideas. I mean, they're all very clever people. They come up with these great ideas, but without proper intellectual property rights protection, they're going to get ripped off, or they're not going to make any money from what they do. They're not going to be able to make a living. So the role of the intellectual property lawyer in the tech field is incredibly important at that early stage. Obviously, it's important for Microsoft now as well, but I'm not worried about their intellectual property rights. But I do want to, and I do get involved in helping to protect the intellectual property rights of the early startup companies that are the future of technology. It is comparable to protecting artists. There's a lot in common between the arts sector and the traditional areas and the new technologies. And after all, I was very fortunate in writing this book about software protection at a time when there was a question about whether copyright would protect computer programs. Because what were they? They were part of a machine. But actually, the same principles apply. You've exercised your intellectual input to create something that's new and useful, and you need protection. Otherwise, you're going to find it taken away from you, because there are some people out there who will do that. Just as in 1735, when William Hogarth promoted the first Copyright Act for visual artists, he did it because he'd done a painting, he was going to do a print of it, but people would come to his studio to make a copy of his paintings and then produce a very poor quality, cheap version of his prints. So he got copyright protection for his printmaking, and that was exactly the same issue that was faced by people who have new ideas in the tech sector. They need protection, otherwise they're going to lose their livelihoods. Simple as that.